In our last example, you may have were picking up on that. Depending on which quadrant determined our values of x and y, meaning that in some quadrants x was positive, sometimes quadrants the x was negative, and vice versa. And so what that's going to allow us to do or help us to understand is this idea over here that I filled in on this grid that I had. So depending on the positive or the negative values of x and y, we know that quadrant 1, all of the trigonometric functions will be positive because x and y are both positive. Therefore, when we evaluate all the 6 identities, we're going to see that they all are positive. Now, if we work through that and look in the second quadrant, we'll find out that the sine and the cosecant, that they will always be positive. So every angle that we're asking for, the sine or the cosecant, that lands in the second quadrant, we know that the sine and the cosecant will be positive, and we will then know that the other 4 will be negative. In the third column, or the third quadrant, it's the tangents and the cotangents that are positive. And in the fourth quadrant, it's the cosine and its reciprocal secant, which are positive. Now, we just didn't make those up. And if you need to prove those to yourself, go ahead and throw in a couple of numbers and look through these tangents, cosecants, secants, and cotangents, and so forth, and kind of get a sense of where the negatives and the positives come into play so that its result will either be negative or positive. And I think you only need to do a couple to convince yourself if you're not convinced already. And if you're not convinced already, you need to do a couple of them so that you are convinced. But once you do that, this little tool might be helpful for us sometimes to get a sense of, well, yeah, it's going to be in quadrant X, so therefore I know it's going to be positive or negative or whatever it might be. So one of the examples, just to see how this plays out, is what quadrant is my angle going to land in where I know that the tangent is negative and its cosine is positive? How can I rule that out? Well, let's look at some possibilities. The tangent, where the tangent is negative, the tangent of negative that is negative can happen in either the second or the fourth quadrants. I know that in the first and the third, the tangent is positive. So it has to be in the other two where the tangent is negative. And then the cosine, where's the cosine positive? Which quadrants are we going to have a positive cosine? And that occurs over here on the right side in quadrants 1 and quadrants 4. And so I know that where both of those overlap at, that this is true. That's a Q. In quadrant 4. So that's the only place where my particular angle, where the tangent will be negative and the cosine will be positive, that only occurs in the quadrant 4 region.